This is Archaeodeath, an exploration in the archaeology of death and memory, past and present, with Professor Howard Williams.
Archaeodeathlings, it's archaeologist Howard Williams here, and I'm delighted to be here with another special guest all the way from Sweden. It's Hannah. Hannah, please introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Howard. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about my research today. I do ancient DNA, archaeogenetics, paleogenetics. We were just talking about what to call it, but essentially, yeah, working with DNA from past peoples and also fauna, which we can talk about a little bit. Yeah, to learn about the past, especially interested in mobility and how people connect with one another and interact with each other in the past, especially the Roman Mediterranean is what I've specialized in so far.
Right. I mean, this is so exciting and touches so many things because I tend to do post-Roman, but I mean, I have to understand the Roman world and the latest research on the Roman world to understand what comes next chronologically, but also, the whole field of palaeoarchaeogenetics is such an important one for both the vistas on the past it's providing, new insights, and, the challenges it's presenting our pop culture reception of that work, isn't it? And so I'd love to approach both, sort of starting off with understanding a bit more about your work and then moving into how we've got to be addressing some of these misuses of archaeopaleogenetic research. So firstly, can I just ask that term then? So what is your preferred version? Is it paleo or archaeo? Because I love calling things paleo and archaeo, but I mean, and I call myself Archaeodeath online, so it's just I did that as a bit of a joke, because everyone was doing it, and I thought, wow, I'll just call it Archaeodeath, But I mean, what does it do for you? Which is the best term, or are they interchangeable?
I think they're pretty interchangeable. I think I think, I work at the Center for Paleogenetics, so here we use the term paleogenetics, but the two are, maybe officially I need to say that one. No, but the two are pretty interchangeable. And one thing that's nice about archaeogenetics is it sort of specifically calls out connections with archaeology. So I think, whichever suits, I think they both work pretty well. Yeah.
And so this is within the broader umbrella of archaeological science. I mean, how did you get to be an archaeological scientist and a paleogeneticist? How did you come from the genetic side or the archaeology, or have you always been doing a bit of both?
Well, yeah. So initially, during my undergrad, I was initially majoring in chemistry, and then I took a class, called Ancient Celtic Societies, which was really fun and kind of got me hooked on. I think what was really fascinating about that class was seeing how archaeology and history was relevant to the present, was relevant to identity, was relevant to politics, was relevant to a lot of stuff in the present. And so then I switched my major to archaeology, and then sort of was in the archaeology field and then sort of came back to the chemistry and genetic side of it. I do a lot of lab work, so there's definitely chemistry involved. And so it's, I guess a little bit of both, although I think of myself, my degree is in archaeology. So, yeah.
Fantastic. That's really useful. So you've been, your doctoral research is now long past your postdoc, aren't you, officially? So your postdoc was on your doctoral research, was on what specifically was that tackling?
Yeah, that was looking at mobility in the Iron Age and Roman Mediterranean. So we were so lucky to work, with colleagues in Italy and Tunisia and Sardinia, and then other places around the Mediterranean and sequence ancient DNA. That was a lot of what I did, was the lab work, the full head to toe suit and the many layers of PPE to try and extract the genomes that we worked with.
So you were lab-based because these projects are so logistically complex. I mean, I can't even imagine how you have to, all the liaisons with different research institutions and the museums to get the samples, and then to actually it all ends up with a phenomenally complex paper, most of which is taken up by the authors' names. It seems to me,
exactly.
But I'm only meaning that as a jest. But but it involves so many people, doesn't it? And you're at the lab end pulling it all together.
Yeah.
Go on.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, with some of our projects, we had, 50 authors and everybody was contributing so much. I mean, it was because you have, the archaeological and interpretive aspects that are so important. I mean, I think that's, what really lets you give meaning to these results. And then, of course, the lab work, the computational work, the writing, the statistics, all of it, brought together. So yeah, it was a big team, but then everybody, so our first paper from that project was 2019, and it was a time series of individuals from central Italy. spanning quite a long period, like 12,000 years, like too many years, but but mostly focused on like the imperial period. So that was sort of our largest data set, and we found that it was a really diverse population, people coming from all over the empire, North Africa, the Levant, the Eastern Mediterranean, across Europe, and that wasn't sort of just in the imperial period, but it started earlier. It started in the Iron Age when you had the Etruscans in Italy, and it continued after. So I think that was something that we saw. It's not surprising the imperial period was diverse, but then, that this diversity predated and postdated that was pretty cool.
And that we're going to come back to this later on, where people love simple, models of population movement, migrations, invasions, which we've spent like literally almost 100 years trying to move our way away from those kind of models, and yet they're so seductive. And we see, but surprise, surprise, it's more complicated. And so as you'd expect for the Mediterranean through from the Bronze Age, but particularly the Iron Age, I imagine, populations are moving around on a macro scale, but you've also got that sort of trickle of people are always going to be. It's a maritime society. I mean, so I suppose that's what you're picking up. Is it only coastal sites, or is it inland too? Was it sort of there was no sort of particular pattern in that regard, or was it the whole of the population shows mixture with different regions?
Yeah, we did. So I guess most of the sites that we focused on were either coastal or major cities like Rome. So of course that would have been, highly interconnected. But we did see also in rural settings. We studied, for instance, Philomania, which is a more rural site in central Italy, that also had a quite diverse population.
Right.
Yeah. So it is moving beyond the coasts, or people are moving beyond the coasts.
And like these studies, you're thinking of samples that sort of offset potential biases all the time, aren't you? And trying to think, well, we don't want to have a sample that's only a major city, or so that's really good. So that was a really prominent study then, and sort of set, but that was one of many. So you've kept going with that, yeah?
Yeah, we've continued working on this, and other labs have too. So it's actually really exciting to think about sort of, even though 2019 was 6-7 years ago, not that long ago. I mean, there's so much more. So many more ancient genomes that have been produced, and also sort of a lot more work bridging across different fields and bringing, people from isotope work into dialogue with genetics. That's actually, I think, one of my favorite directions in the field, is looking at, there's different types of stable isotopes that you can study from the skeletal remains. And for example, strontium and oxygen can give you an insight into mobility within someone's lifetime, and then comparing that with genetics. And oftentimes they don't actually match. There might be people who have a local strontium signal and a non-local ancestry signal, or vice versa. And so it's neat to sort of, be able to see, both lifetime mobility and then also maybe the mobility of their ancestors.
That's so important, isn't it? And again, that's one of the modern myths that people jump to, is they assume someone is diverse, they must be an immigrant, as in they literally fell off a boat, to use the that kind of cliche of and that's another way of sort of. But these populations, you would expect people to be, second, third, fourth generation, but they may be very local and never have moved in their lives. Not everyone's literally up sticks every day, but they have an ancestry that shows those connections. That's so important, And I'm forgive my sort of technical question, but I'm really interested in understanding the relationship between your PhD work when you're part of a big project and various postdoc positions, and how because you're all co-authoring. I mean, was your PhD on a very specific aspect, or was it a particular aspect? How does it work in those big science-based projects? Because I mean, I did a PhD; it was very much my thing, and it was like I had a supervisor who, a committee, and there were other students doing related things, but it was just my baby, it was my thing. Yeah. So, but it's very different from what you're doing, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of, we had sort of 3 papers come out of, what I was working on in my PhD, but then, I wasn't always like the first author. I did a bunch of the lab work, and also sort of making those connections between the genetics and the archaeology, and sort of bringing people together. But I worked really closely with a couple colleagues in my lab, Margaret Antonio and Ziwei Gao. We worked together, to write these, and they were doing a lot of the computational work, which is, really labor intensive too. And there's a lot of creativity in that as well. I think that's one thing that when I teach about ancient DNA, I love to point out that, like, any ancestry sources or any of these plots that you see, there was a lot of choices that went into that, and that you can only answer the questions that you ask. So if you're, you need to make sure when you're studying the Roman Empire that you're sort of including a really broad set of genomes because there was so much mobility. If you didn't say, oh, were there people from North Africa, for instance, here, you would miss them. You need to ask that question to be able to people. And of course they are there. So,
I mean,
just one example.
Yeah, I mean, I confess, it's a bit of a black box for me because I don't understand all of that stuff. So when I'm reading the papers, to paraphrase a certain Schultz Peanuts cartoon, where they're sort of, what do you do when you get to a difficult Russian name? Well, I just blip over it, and I must admit, I do that with the papers. I go blah 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 bit, and then and what did they find? Because I'm not, I don't understand it, but I do respect and understand it's it's not an easy, it's not the machine goes bing and the results say,
yeah, exactly.
it's not that way. It's much more complicated. Trying to work out frequencies and likelihoods that these people are from various localities or regions, and it's going to ever evolve as your sample changes. Is that fair to say? So excavations are being available for new results and new data sets.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, like when we published the 2019 paper, there weren't that many published genomes from the Roman period, from the imperial period. So there was a lot of like speculative, like, we could say they're like modern people from this area, or, people have ancestry similar to people from other periods from this area. But, one could really do a lot with, now that we have such a much bigger data set. And that's actually one thing, like what you were saying about, that some of these analyses can feel mysterious. But I think that's one thing when I teach that I really like, students will come from all different disciplines, and my goal is that they can sort of leave the class with sort of the knowledge to say, how would they set up one of these studies, to answer questions that they're interested in. So it might be different from what's in any paper, but sort of how would they curate the data, even the labels you give to a time period or to a context, even the term Roman, right, is quite loaded. Yeah,
yes, so all of the levels of interpretation. I didn't realize, I thought you were primarily a researcher. I'm glad you're getting to getting to teach us, to share this. So because it's always about the next generation, isn't it, and trying to get new people engaged in these fields, or they stagnate. So that's really cool. So that's really good. And it's not that your skill set sets you up for doing projects in all periods and places now, right? So you're not abandoning that Roman Mediterranean expertise, and you've got your publications on it, but also I understand you're working on slightly older material as well.
Yeah, and that's
Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, I've been working on a much older time period, material from about 25 to 30,000 years ago in Europe.
Wow,
so
that's old.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been quite a challenge, but one that I think we're doing pretty well on in the lab is to work with this material. I'm part of this project called the Mamba Project. It's the massive accumulation of mammoth bones. So it's these gravettian sites where a lot of megafaunal remain is accumulated, like Krakow's Spadica is one of them.
Oh, yes.
So this famous site in Poland. And our PI is the excavator, the head of this grant is the excavator of that site. And so that's been really interesting to take material that's been in museums for 100 years. And before that, it was in the ground for 25,000 years and be like, can we get DNA from this? And we have, which has been, I've been doing a lot of like trial and error with different methods of how to optimize, getting DNA from material that's this old, but we've had some success, and we're looking at, what can we learn about the animals in these sites? So like, are they mostly male? Or are they mostly female? Can we learn about the herd structure of mammoths, stuff like that? So we have a paper coming out sometime later this year, I think, that will be, shed some insight on that. Yeah. So
see, I was defaulting to, we haven't even mentioned the word human remains, but of course, all of this relies on excavation and curation of human remains. And now, when I kind of assumed you were going to be talking about a small sample size of Paleolithic human skeletal material, but or fossilized skeletal material. But no, you're talking about the mammoths. That's cool.
And like piles of mammoths. There's some of these have hundreds of individuals in them, some of these big accumulation sites. So more material than one can work on, but it's it's a cool challenge, and it's been fun to actually get a method up and running that works for these. So that's been really cool.
And do we have a sense of whether this is, the time depth, or is this mass kill sites like some of these North American sort of buffalo, sites, or is this a cumulative material? They're hunting at particular sort of pinch points and a particular optimized hunting locations. I don't know.
It's probably the latter. There was another study looking at Kostenki, one of these ones that has these like circular, some people interpret them as houses, some people think they might just be mounds, but either way, mammoth bones, and they seem to radiocarbon date to different across a couple thousand years. So it's probably like repeated human use, so maybe they need to know, one thing we've talked about is whether, the animals are moving predictably in the landscape, and that might sort of structure where humans are deciding to live and stuff. It's still, much of it's still a mystery, but it's cool to be asking these questions.
So like that, this sounds like another whole area of research that will run and run. It's very exciting. And so, we've got a bit of a sort of at least a surface level insight into, your developing expertise, the application to different human and animal DNA studies, and this field is really exciting. But I mean, I suppose one of the other things we wanted to talk about, and I know you've addressed this in your own social media, is how much of this gets rightly high levels of attention. It's really cutting edge science, and and really cool. But with that comes the horror show of various commentators and reception, and particularly anything to do with the ancient Rome at the moment, if we circle back to that a bit, is so absolutely loaded with this weird mix of ideas people have about the Roman Empire. For me, I think a lot of this is about anxiety of collapse, and we are constantly, living in this worry of what will be the end of what, I'm not sure, but the West or America specifically, or European American supremacy or global power, or is it and then there's those that actually want an end. They want to see the end because they want some kind of techno-fascist future or some kind of white tribal future that will, so there's all sorts of weird mixed contradictory ideas about the Roman Empire that people take forward and back, don't they? And so I kind of, my work is at the end of it, the end of the Roman Empire and what came next in the West, the Western Roman Empire, and trying to debate those issues. But this paleogenetic research is opening up other ways in which it gets used in those weird online discussions. So I can't keep my brain around, I can't wrap my head around it all, is what I'm saying. So please give us a sense of the challenges here.
Yeah, I mean, and one that has been, maybe one sort of very prominent person who's sort of seemed to, I think it's pretty common to look to cultures in the past to naturalize or make points about the present, but one person who's been doing that a lot. Yeah, in like a worrying way is Elon Musk. I guess if we can call people out, I don't know.
Why not? Why not?
Okay. Yeah, one thing he said was Rome fell because the Romans stopped making Romans. And then he points
I remember this now,
BCE.
right?
Yeah.
It's all about population collapse, isn't it? Because they weren't breeding enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the date that he points to in this interview that he's giving, I forget, I think it's like on the Lex Friedman podcast or something, but points to 50 BCE, which of course is pre-imperial. Rome is growing into 100 million person city. So then one wonders, then it leaves like, when he says Romans, is he only referring to some subset of Romans? That's my theory. It's like it's a little bit of a dog whistle for who is a Roman, who isn't a Roman, and like you said, connected to ideas of Western Civ and Europe and not to who else would be a Roman.
Just before before people sort of jump to conclusions, what the point is, not just say someone who's not an academic and an expert says something dumb. It's not about, but these commentators are setting themselves up as experts, setting themselves up as purveyors of truth or historical insight. It's not that they're just a random person who happens to be a billionaire who accidentally makes a gaffe. They are performing expertise in public spaces to millions of followers with no seeming either, so it's not just they're a bit off with their dates, like a film blooper. Oh, look, in that scene, this dramatization of a Jane Austen novel, they've got the wrong pigeon, in the background, or that tree wouldn't have been there. It's not that kind of thing. It's about really dangerous narratives that are, being promoted on social media, on podcasts, on every statement of them is lapped up by millions of people, and that's why it's really scary. I just wanted to say that because I think some people say, "Oh, why should you expect him to know better?" Well, it's not about that. Don't speak about it then if you don't know. And so, yeah, I mean, and so if someone who is obsessed with going into outer space and colonizing Mars, why does he care about the Roman Empire at all? What do you feel the Roman Empire does for these kind of discourses?
Yeah, I feel like, and that's a great point you make too about like I love the idea of multivocality and different people with different expertise interpreting the data. I think everybody should be able to interpret it. And I think,
Yeah.
If we're calling something out, it's, yeah, that you said he's sort of saying to make a point and make an agenda, and it's we're correcting that, and we also should be able to correct that, because I think what he's aiming at, and part of this is I also checked what Grokopedia, so the ex Wikipedia version, says about ancient Rome, and in reference even to our paper, it talks about the imperial period being diverse, and sort of obscures the diversity we found preceding and after that. And so I think, yeah, that just fits with, yeah.
So do you think in his vision, he's saying that because Rome became diverse, it ended?
I think there are people, I don't know if he's ever said that, but I think that is a claim that people try and make, that they want to,
they once were pure, they once had sort of moral and technological and intellectual superiority, but it was it's that dilution anxiety, isn't it, which is all to do with white replacement and all the modern okay. So but your data therefore is suddenly being co-opted into those narratives, and how can we push back against that? I suppose there's not much we can do, really, and I mean, we're never going to have an audience that people are going to listen to us as much as those characters. But I'm not saying it is, but is there an argument for saying, well, why bother? Just, all we can do is our research, and there's no point in saying anything about it. Just, oh well, look, another, or do you feel there's anything else we can do individually or collectively about these things?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think especially because our research doesn't fit that narrative, but people can sort of claim it does. So, we find, 500 years before the period he's talking about, were already people from the Levant, from North Africa, in central Italy. So we can point that out. I think just making the results more accessible, because our results don't support this. So when they're getting co-opted, they're also getting distorted. And actually, the most diverse period we see is late antiquity, sort of as the Western Roman Empire is fragmenting. So that's something they obscure as well, or don't like to highlight.
So. I think the Roman Empire started going downhill when Neanderthals were around. That's what clearly happened. It was all going wrong when the Neanderthals turned up. So at the beginning of the Middle Paleolithic, it ruined it for the Roman Empire.
See, that's how my work connects these two.
Yeah, I knew there'd be. You see, it's the mammoth. We'll blame the mammoth. It was the mammoths that ruined the Roman Empire. There you go. That'll be my next TikTok, and see how many people that confuses. And people go, "What?" No, but seriously, it's difficult to reconcile sort of the counterfactual and the contradictory nature of a lot of these narratives. So do you? Is it about? I always worry about. I've never been involved in one of these big studies that's been taken by the media and gone viral, thankfully. But I have commented on quite a few over the last decade, and I don't blame the original researchers, but I do personally feel. And I've talked to a press officer from Stockholm University about this a long while ago. I don't blame institutions individually either, but the ecosystem we work in means that the story goes out, and there's very little support for researchers if there's pushback or there's virality. There's no real structures to follow up or to go, hey, media, we want to talk to you again and tell you something else. It seems to be it's a one shot. The press release goes out and then it's a free-for-all. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, but it just seems a bit sad that there's no ability to call up the big media companies and say amazing results are that everyone's got it wrong. No one's interested then, are they? No one's going to pick it up. Or so I just wish there was a bit more ability for us, our society, to realize that science isn't either right or wrong, but there's a more complex debate going on here. But I don't know if I'm cynical and think there's no hope, or sometimes I think, well, maybe we should do something about this, but I don't know how. I think it has to come collectively, is my thought.
Yeah.
I think it has to come from big societies, or groups, rather than individual researchers trying to struggle, but I don't know. I don't know what you think
Yeah.
about any of that.
Yeah, we were so lucky with the paper about Rome is that both the press office at Stanford, where I was at the time, and at Sapienza in Rome made a video, like a cartoon video, and then we had it dubbed in English and in Italian, and sort of explained the results of our study, like a 2 minute, and
That's
so that was
brilliant.
really nice. Yeah, and I think, but of course, that takes many people. Like I could have never made an illustrator. I'm not an illustrator. I can't
No.
do this. And so it really, I think, and also, four of us, got together and read the script and, made sure to write the script well. And then, like I said, recorded it in Italian and English. So it took a lot of time, but it would be great if, universities invested in that or grants made more funding available for that because it takes time and money. I think that's the thing is it's expensive and oftentimes, it's only there just isn't the structural support for it, but it is so important. Yeah.
I agree, and I think that I've been critical of some research papers for either accidentally or perhaps purposefully spinning some sensationalism. I've also commended quite a few where the infographic is doing heavy lifting in a good way. It's really distilling down ideas that you then see the media pick up. And I've sort of used some with my students as examples of where, a palaeogenetic study, or it could be something else, it could be stable isotopes or something else, or just an excavation, where the images selected by the press release have really helped the viewer, the reader, or the audience to understand the story, and it can really make a difference, can't it? But equally though, I know it's not always under people's control. I did a blog post earlier this year about a major commercial excavation where I was pointing out how the results distributed to the media just don't make sense, and I knew that was a problem, and I knew it wasn't their fault, but then I did have various commercial archaeologists not angry at me, but frustrated that, but that's because we had to do this press release and we had to get the approval of all these people. And by the time that happened, we couldn't include this information, and we hadn't yet found we were still excavating the grave when they did the press release or whatever it was. So it's all this kind of, you realize it's an incredible sort of juggling act of, trying to organize, you're doing the dig, you're doing the research, and there's a demand for news. So I've got a lot of sympathy, and I don't want to ever appear I don't, but equally, it's a real challenge to get the story right. But it sounds like that's a really effective way of having short video that sort of distills it down, before it's released. So you have that, and that sounds like good university press offices, good research cultures can do that. That's really good. Yeah,
but it's rare. I mean, we certainly haven't done it for every paper, but I would love to, and I'll try and make my own videos, but then maybe they're especially when I think it's something you've written, it's really hard to distill it to like 2 minutes. In fact, my feedback is like, you should make shorter videos. And it's like, I can't, there's too many details.
I'd have mixed feelings about that because actually, I get told that all the time, but then equally some of my more popular people I follow are much more popular than me. I look at their videos, there's nothing that I don't do here. And they've done it in 5 times the time. They've done a 10-minute ramble, but it's not a ramble. It's actually a really eloquent, structured argument. But people are really following it. So I suppose it depends on the subject. But all I can say is, I wouldn't worry too much about it. And at the end of the day, the algorithm will do what the algorithm does. And we can't control it. And it's really frustrating when I see, the cutting edge, people who should be like getting millions of views don't get it. And you think, why isn't this person, a hit in this context? Because they're doing exactly the kind of, it's not predictable. Is the point? Is it? That's the frustrating thing. But we can do our bit. So, I would like to. Obviously, we could have done a whole conversation about each of these areas in greater depth, but I'd love to sort of ask about what you think the future of the field has in store. Is it you're in the middle of it all? It must be a sort of a constant sort of storm of research but can you see any emerging trends that you think our audiences should be aware of, in terms of new challenges or new areas? You talked about the combination of stable isotopes and DNA studies. I've already seen that in a number of research papers, really. What do you feel? Where's it going, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think technically, right, this a lot of people are already sort of doing some of these next steps now, like bridging archaeology and anthropology and genetics. So I think that's really exciting to see. Sedimentary DNA, I think, is also really interesting. People looking at, human, plant, and animal traces in sediment. I think that's great and less destructive than working with bones. So I'm excited about that, because then you're just working with a soil core. I mean, it introduces a lot of new challenges. It's sort of, especially differentiating between sort of similar species that you might find, as well as the problem of whether DNA is moving between layers of the soil. So that's something that people are even sort of still actively, trying to figure out. And, some people have found, reliable results in caves, but if caves aren't mixing so much, is that also true in open air archaeological sites? Like, I don't think we know the answer to that yet, but it'll be cool to find out. And yes, I think sedimentary DNA is important. I think there's also a lot of work about, I guess ethics, I think, is something that is really important. And I think that field is rapidly growing, which is really exciting to see too, people sort of engaging with, how do we do this work ethically and sustainably? So I think some of the work I'm really excited about is grappling with that. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool stuff. And do you have any final thoughts for students or researchers? Is there anything that any sage lessons that you would like to impart to younger, but versions of yourself would like to have heard? Because we talk about it. Well, we actually don't talk about it enough. There's perhaps in certain circles there are a lot of discussions of the many really quite unhelpful or toxic nature of academic research and the competitive culture, the pressures, but equally, so we never talk about it enough. But equally, I just wondered if you had any thoughts on what you found particularly helpful or particularly challenging that you think younger people or new scholars or students would benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that when I teach, again, to reference that, is one thing that that so many questions are still unanswered. Like if you have a question, that you think is interesting, there's a good chance that it hasn't been answered, or it hasn't been answered in, there's other ways to investigate it. So for instance, one of the things that we do in my classes, we make a principal component analysis plot. So one of these plots you see, it's like often figure 2 in every paper, right? If figure 1 is a map, figure 2 is principal component analysis.
That's true, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is it? And there's the plot, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty common because it gives you like a high level overview. So they're useful. I mean, that's why it's the second plot, but we work on sort of everybody makes their own version of that. And I think in doing that, people realize, oh, there are so many questions to be answered. Like they can combine the data in different ways. They can say, oh, I want to study this region. And maybe somebody will have published, a paper that focuses on the pop gen of that region, but not the genetic relatedness or between individuals, or, how, kinship and, kinship is sort of a term that shouldn't be exclusively genetic, but is also including social aspects. So like, how does mortuary archaeology and where somebody was in a cemetery connect with, how they're related to others in the cemetery? That, even if data has been published on something, there's still so many more questions to ask, especially when you're coming from other disciplines. So yeah, I mean, I would say there's so much more work to do. So if people are getting into it, there's a lot to do. We need you.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, I think that is something I struggled with even later than I should have, shall we say, is I always still, thought, oh, well, someone must have asked it first. And that thought perhaps I was a bit not arrogant enough or not confident enough, not, there are so many questions and as long as you've done the work and you've actually done the background and found, to then have the confidence to go, actually, you know what? No one's looked at it this way, or no one's asked this set of questions. And sometimes some of the dumb questions I've come up with, it's for good reason, and then you think, well, I see why, because how on earth am I going to answer that? But no, if you have a good question and then you can see a path towards exploring it, to give people that sense of encouragement. Don't feel it's all shut down and there's no way in. There's always a new question, as you say. I think that's a really good point. And I need to remind myself of that sometimes, where you just get, when you're in a topic, an area where, well, I think I've understood that, and I think I understood. Oh, hang on, look at that. I don't remember. Have I looked at that before? That issue? Has anyone else? No, and then suddenly, it kickstarts you again into a new avenue.
Yeah, right. Or if multiple people are working on the same thing, I think there's so many questions to ask that it's like, that's fine. I mean, then we'll learn more. Like, that's great. So, yeah.
Well, it's been a real pleasure talking, Hannah, and
Likewise.
I'm sure we'll have a chance to chat again. And I will put if you are willing, in the description links to your social media so people can
Oh,
follow
that'd be
you,
great.
and maybe some of the key papers, so that people can go and read the stuff. And so hopefully the comment section of these videos is a resource that people can start to learn, rather than just listen to the chat as an end point. And just keep on doing what you're doing. It's great stuff on every level, and I'm excited because I kind of don't know very little about mammoths, but I'm very excited about rat mammoths. I know a little bit more about the Roman world, but and I'm excited about that too. But somehow the mammoths have an edge for me. But maybe that's just because I like big cute furry things, even though they're sadly passed away long ago.
No.
But I hope they're going to be back, because if there's one benefit of climate change, I think somehow the mammoths will return. Like they'll be like, it's mammoth time, and then suddenly look out the window, and then no, I know it doesn't work that way, but we've got to indulge my fantasies about the world. But
Well, and
no,
you can
seriously,
learn.
it's good stuff.
Well, and they're so relevant to elephant conservation too. I mean, elephants are just an amazing species, or several species, and so I
Yes.
think, one thing I would love to learn is like, how did elephants or their relatives like move around in a world less hampered by human obstacles? So I think it's actually really relevant to conservation, and of how would Asian or African elephants be moving around their world in a different, yeah,
Absolutely.
less constrained.
So
Yeah.
much of this new paleogenetic research is telling us about us or our world, and directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
And yes, it gets misused in some crazy ways, but there's a lot of good coming out of this, so it's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. And yeah, your work is so inspiring. And we
Oh,
chatted about
thank
this
you.
over email too, that you were really encouraging of me doing. We met at a conference once, and you
Yes.
right,
And
and I forgot. Yeah.
I confess I forgot we've met,
Oh, no.
because I don't know
Mhm.
my brain and conference. Like, I have an internet brain of people I meet online, and I have a conference brain, and then I have the where I'm living and working. But and suddenly I see someone who's intersected, and I'll either not realize and think they're a completely different person, and I go, hang on, didn't we talk about this? And
Yeah, yeah.
they're yes, and oh right. So I apologize for not making the
No,
connection,
no.
but I'm glad I was encouraging, at least, rather than
Yeah.
going, no, you shouldn't do that, young person.
No, you were like, because I was like, oh, I'd love to make content, but I'm struggling to get into it, and yeah, you encouraged me to be confident and to go for it. So I appreciate that.
Oh,
That
I
was really
appreciate that, because
helpful.
I think the fact is, and I we should be all, the more individual research. Not everyone, it's not for everyone, and I know that
Yeah.
there are demographics and issues with the abuse you'll get. Everyone gets abused, but certain people more than others. I know, I respect that, and it's not for everyone. I would, but if you get if you can represent your discipline, then I think it's really important, because the more of us doing it, the better. It's not about
Mhm.
having celebrity individuals. It's about having that broader
Yeah.
swathe of expertise in those public spaces. But so well done, you. Keep doing that,
Likewise,
and I
thank
hope
you.
we get some more followers if we keep promoting via this video. But thank you for your time, and we shall hopefully scheme again at some point, or talk again.
Oh, thanks. I'll look forward to that. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Howard Williams on YouTube. In addition, consider following the Archaeodeath WordPress blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.